When her 7-year-old daughter was brutally murdered by a sex offender, this mother took an extraordinary step that no one could have foreseen. Marianne Bachmeier became known as the Revenge Mom after confronting her daughter's killer in court and ensuring he faced justice in her own way. Today, I'll recount the tragic murder that altered her life forever and reveal what transpired in the courtroom and beyond. Let's dive in. Imagine your child was murdered and the perpetrator lied about it openly in court. Wouldn't that make your blood boil? This is the story of Marianne Bachmeier, a 30-year-old German mother who shot her daughter's murderer. But it wasn't a secret act carried out in some dark alley. Marianne smuggled a gun into the courtroom and opened fire on him. Her actions made headlines overnight in the 1980s in Germany. She became a symbol of vigilante justice, dividing public opinion like the Berlin Wall. Some believed her actions were justified. Others labeled her a cold-blooded killer. But what drove Marianne to take justice into her own hands? Was it a failure of the legal system or simply a quest for vengeance? 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier was described by those who knew her as cheerful and independent. She was bright for her age, and her mother often treated her like a little adult. Her father, Christian, ran a pub in Lübeck, Germany, where Marianne worked as a bartender. The long hours at the pub meant late nights for Marianne. Anna learned to be self-reliant early on and spent much of her time at the pub. The events unfolded on May 5, 1980. Anna woke up, dressed herself while Marianne slept, and began what seemed like an ordinary morning for them both. Marianne often relied on Anna to get herself ready for school because of her late-night work schedule. However, that Monday was different. Anna was upset over an argument with her mother from the previous day. Determined to teach her mom a lesson, she decided to skip school. Naturally, she didn't stay home where Marianne might discover her plan. Instead, Anna wandered off. When Marianne woke up later that morning, she prepared for an appointment under the assumption that Anna had gone to school as usual. But when she returned home that afternoon, Anna was nowhere to be found. The little girl would never be seen alive again. The next day brought devastating news. Police informed Marianne that they had detained a man who confessed to killing Anna. The man was Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old sex offender living nearby. Anna had known Klaus, they were neighbors, and she loved his cats. What child could resist playing with kittens? Klaus abducted Anna, assaulted her sexually, then strangled her with his fiancée's pantyhose. Afterward, he placed Anna's body in a cardboard box and attempted to bury it near a canal. It was his fiancée who ultimately turned him in. Shockingly, Klaus had committed similar crimes before. In 1976, he had been convicted of abusing 2 young girls and opted for chemical castration, a procedure using hormone blockers to suppress testosterone production and other sex hormones. At the time, volunteering for castration could earn early release from prison. However, in an unexpected twist, Klaus later received hormone treatments to reverse the castration effects. His libido returned. Upon his arrest for Anna's murder, Klaus admitted to killing her, but claimed he had valid reasons for doing so. He denied ever touching the child and instead alleged that Anna tried to blackmail him by threatening to accuse him of abuse unless he paid her money. Fearing imprisonment again, Klaus killed Anna and buried her body. His explanation defied logic but deeply shook Marianne. How could he accuse her daughter of extortion? To Marianne, it was unthinkable. Anna would never do such a thing. While Anna may have been mature for her age, concocting such a scheme at 7 years old seemed impossible. To Marianne, Klaus represented everything wrong with society. A predator allowed to regain his libido due to poor judicial decisions. This time would be different. Klaus wouldn't escape accountability again. Life hadn't been kind to Marianne Bachmeier. Born in northwest Germany in 1950 during post-World War II border changes, she spent part of her childhood in a refugee camp after her parents fled East Prussia. Raised in a strict religious household, Marianne's father was an officer in the Waffen-SS, the Nazi Party's combat branch, and clung stubbornly to delusions about Hitler's survival after the war. At night, he would place young Marianne on his lap and tell tales of how Hitler's return would elevate him to general status someday. He embodied authoritarianism, but also struggled with alcoholism and violence. A pub near their home became his frequent haunt before returning drunk to abuse Marianne and her mother. Eventually, Marianne's parents divorced. However, life didn't improve when her mother remarried another man whom Marianne described as dictatorial. Violence was second nature to him, and Marianne bore the brunt of it. By the time she turned 15, she had blossomed into a striking young woman. That's when she met a boy from an affluent family and fell deeply in love. Marianne would sneak out at night to see her boyfriend, which eventually led to an unplanned pregnancy. When he learned of it, her wealthy beau abandoned her, and her family seemed to turn against her too. Uncle Paul threw her out of the house upon discovering the truth. That night, Marianne slept on a park bench. Her mother secretly rented an apartment for her to stay in, and her half-sisters smuggled food to her. But the arrangement didn't remain hidden for long. Her stepfather found out, and the violence resumed. Marianne gave birth just 3 months before turning 17, but ultimately decided to place the baby for adoption. Less than 2 years later, she fell in love again and became pregnant once more. As before, the relationship didn't last, leaving Marianne unsure about raising a child alone. One night during the second pregnancy, Marianne was raped at gunpoint. Her attacker threatened to kill her if she reported him, but Marianne refused to let him go unpunished. She contacted the police, who arrested him. You might expect Uncle Paul to show compassion after such a traumatic event, but he didn't. Instead, he threw Marianne out again. Between the assault and Uncle Paul's cruelty, Marianne reached her breaking point and attempted suicide. Fortunately, doctors managed to save both her and her unborn child. She gave birth to her second baby, but allowed the father's parents to adopt it. Shortly after this, Uncle Paul passed away, enabling Marianne to return home at last. She found work as a waitress at a lively pub and quickly became popular among patrons. However, she only had eyes for Christian, the pub's owner, and they soon began a relationship. At 22 years old, Marianne became pregnant with Christian's child. This time felt different. She believed she could handle motherhood alone if necessary. Christian wasn't keen on commitment. 6 months later, in November 1972, baby Anna was born. Determined to avoid another pregnancy, Marianne underwent sterilization surgery. Anna was all she needed, but raising a child as a single mother wasn't easy. Marianne worked long hours at the pub and often brought baby Anna along with her. It's said that she enjoyed late-night parties while Anna slept nearby during those years of her 20s. Marianne recognized that this wasn't an ideal environment for raising a child and even considered placing Anna with a foster family for a more traditional upbringing. Despite these challenges, Anna grew up as a happy and cherished little girl. Fast forward now to March 6, 1981, the third day of Klaus Grabowski's trial for Anna's murder. Marianne had been present in court daily. She listened as Klaus's defense team argued that his actions were a result of severe hormonal imbalances caused by treatments reversing his earlier castration after molesting 2 young girls years prior. Klaus was scheduled to testify that day, but he never got the chance. Marianne entered the courtroom around 10 a.m. with a .22 caliber Beretta hidden beneath an oversized trench coat. Without warning, she drew the weapon and fired 6 shots into Klaus's back. He died instantly in a pool of blood. Marianne remained motionless afterward. She didn't resist arrest and allowed authorities to take her into custody. After 4 months of intense testimony exchanges between both sides' arguments, on March 2, 1983, The court convicted Marianne Bachmeier of manslaughter rather than murder, sentencing her to 6 years imprisonment, following deliberations proving lack premeditation evidence, conclusively aligning with public outrage. Due to sentiments favorably toward leniency, parole eligibility. An early release was achieved, shortening actual served term duration to 3-year total. She served only 3 years in prison before being released on parole in 1986. After her release, Marianne married a teacher, and the couple relocated to Africa. Some accounts suggest they settled in Ghana, while others claim it was Nigeria. However, their marriage ended in 1990. Following the separation, Marianne moved to Sicily, where she took a job as an assistant in a hospital in Palermo, helping terminally ill people cases. It seemed like a fitting role for someone who had experienced so much loss. Tragically, Marianne's time was running out. In the mid-1990s, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She returned to Germany to spend her remaining days embracing her identity as the revenge mom. It's worth noting that Marianne was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder because prosecutors couldn't prove premeditation. The public had been outraged that she was even charged with murder in the first place. Marianne always insisted that she acted out of overwhelming emotion when she shot Klaus. However, her narrative evolved over time. In a 1995 interview on a German talk show, she admitted that her actions were deliberate. She explained that Klaus had spread lies about Anna, and that silencing him was her goal. She recalled knowing he would testify that day and thinking, "Here comes the next lie about my child." Just 1 year after this candid interview, Marianne succumbed to cancer at the age of 46. She was laid to rest beside Anna's grave in Lübeck. In 2006, a former acquaintance of Marianne claimed that she had actually practiced the shooting beforehand in the basement of Christian's pub.